What's up, everybody? We are back with another edition of the Ad Podcast. And today I have a super exciting guest for you guys. Ryan Wenger is a second time entrepreneur, CEO, and founder of InHouse. InHouse is a really cool startup that I met recently at first Thursdays on a Tuesday, which was an exciting event, and learned a little bit more about Ryan's background and what he's building at InHouse. I've pitched it into a few of my consulting clients, and we've gotten really great feedback. And InHouse is essentially an AI tool with real lawyers on the back end to make sure that whatever the AI is manifesting is legally sound. So if you've got documents or contracts or things that you're working on, you can use it. For those of you who know me, what I do in my day job, doing influencer campaigns and management, we're very contract heavy. And so far, all of my testing with InHouse has come out pretty stellar. So with that being said, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. We're really glad to have you.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. So let's dive right into it. You're a second time entrepreneur. What gave you the crazy idea of doing it all again? And what was your background that kind of got you into this entrepreneurial journey?
Once you've created a company and made jobs and seen your product in the hands of real people making a little difference, there's nothing like that. So we got lucky to a large degree in our last company, and there's AI is transformative, truly is. So I saw a need and decided to head into it. My background really the thing that made me love tech was building a website for my dad in high school. My dad had a bookstore in upstate New York, a used bookstore, and he sells antiquarian, Celtic, and Arthurian books.
Wow.
You can imagine how many wanderers down the street in a small town happen to be looking upon that. So I knew it was great for the internet, but he wasn't very tech savvy. So I just built the website. I connected it to some APIs pre-Amazon and didn't tell him basically. And then one day we plugged it in and we got back from dinner and there was a book order from another country. And
wow.
I saw the power of technology. I'm not, I became a lawyer. I'm not a coder. I always partnered with people. Even for that project, this was it's eighth grade, and I partnered with a coder in my class to make it happen. So
I love that. Yeah, I love I feel like all entrepreneurs have that, childhood story. Yours is a lot more impactful than mine. Mine was I went door to door selling caterpillars for 25 cents or something like that. So the fact that you actually found something useful to do for the family business is pretty awesome.
I don't know. Yours might be one of the most resourceful stories like that I've ever heard.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely got a few quarters for the cute factor, I think. But anyways, hey, you brought up an interesting point, and we're going to spend the midpoint of the show really focused on your entrepreneurial philosophy and kind of a really interesting blog post that you wrote about your experience with your first company. But I think you brought up an interesting point. CTO, technical co-founder. Can you do it without going out and finding a technical co-founder? Can you do it through, essentially spending money to write your code, working with agency partners? What's your take there on the CTO tech founder?
I think as a non-technical founder, you have to avoid the allure of the allure of finding an independent contractor or an agency and trying to manage engineers. You need a partner.
Yeah.
That was, that mistake set me back a couple of years in my first company, WhereTo, which is the company I sold. Oh yeah.
Oh man, mine was brutal. I'll tell you about it after you tell me yours.
Cool. WhereTo was my last company that sold, and its first incarnation was Where4, and it was the first budget to tell you where you could travel for how much money you wanted to spend. And it's my first version of it. I hired coders to build it, and it's just you don't know what you're doing. So it took me years, to learn. In my second company, I found an incredible technical partner, owns half the company, and he's a brain. He's like a thought. He's like a partner throughout the whole thing. So I think it's very doable to build a software company as a non-technical person. More and more, you don't need to code at all, but it's very important to find like a peer level technical person.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. My first startup was, two guys who were more biz dev and sales, and we outsourced everything. We went through 3 different dev shops. We were twice as expensive and twice as long as we expected to deliver our MVP.
Right.
And the real crazy part was we outsourced to Beijing, and we found out that the guy who was running our project, who is a Canadian, was working Beijing programmers after they had already put in a 12-hour day. And the other founder, who is here in Orange County, didn't know this guy. This guy was moonlighting off the books, basically using company resources to run our project as a side hustle. And when that guy got fired after this all came out, I had to go to Orange County, meet the owner of this dev shop, basically put my hat out in my hand and say, hey man, like, you can either completely fuck us right now, or we can come to an arrangement and figure out it. I'm lucky thank God he was cool enough to be like, hey, this wasn't really your fault. This was my fault. And, let's figure out something. So we did that. I think the idea of that technical co-founder also comes into another one of your entrepreneurial principles, which is, talk to everybody about your idea. You wrote this really interesting component in the beginning of that blog post that we'll touch on later, but I think it's important to bring up in this context where essentially, you should not NDA people. You should not keep your idea under lock and key. You should literally talk to everybody that comes inside of your ecosystem. I actually met a Russian dude that moved here from Russia, drove Uber, kept a pitch deck in the back of his Uber, and funded his company by just driving people around LA. So it's a super easy thing not easy, but if you're resourceful and you put yourself in as many at-bats as possible, I think that's important. But if you as an entrepreneur can sell a technical person on your idea, and you can get them to have the same amount of skin in it as you do, like, anybody will take your money and build an MVP. But you have to really have a good idea in order to get a technical co-founder to come in with you 50-50 on risk.
That's right. It's kind of like it's like your first validation that you're doing something worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I love.
I think a lot of people get scarred from seeing movies like Facebook, the social network, where someone steals an idea. It just but in reality, the hardest part is like selling your idea. Getting people to care. So you got to get that out early.
Yeah,
and also it often takes on a life of its own. I mean, we'll probably touch on it later, but Wherefore turned into like something I never imagined, and it only happened because I'm just constantly telling everyone that will listen about it, and then they take it in their own direction.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, what was the problem that was keeping you up at night? You've called yourself a recovering mediocre corporate attorney, so you obviously have some technical expertise, but what was the problem that you saw in the marketplace that was keeping you up at night? And you're like, I gotta get this thing. I gotta birth this thing for my second child.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the problem not in the law firm, but as a founder, how inaccessible basic legal services are for businesses. I found out soon after that in a law firm, you just think everyone has a lawyer. And I discovered they don't, and it's so expensive. And because it's so expensive, 60% of US businesses don't have any lawyers to do any of their work. They're totally doing it themselves. Like gym owners are drafting or finding their own contracts, employment contracts, using the wrong ones, wrong terms of services on your website. Like everyone's doing it, making mistakes, hoping it doesn't catch fire. So that was the problem I wanted to solve. I knew AI was equipped to do it. the insight was that ChatGPT does a pretty good job at legal work, like
Wow.
transformatively good. Like it certainly hallucinates sometimes, and in some places it's really limited. But generally speaking, it's like 10 times better than what people were doing with just Googling and like using LegalZoom. And I knew that if you loop lawyers into the process, that feedback if you could incent them to provide feedback on top of the baseline ChatGPT work, you'd be able to fine tune it and build something radically better. So that was like the step by step. That was, that was the insight. That's what I wanted to build.
Yeah, that's great. So, whenever I hear about AI plus humans, I get a little bit scared about the multiple, of a SaaS plus services multiple. But I don't think you're really building a SaaS plus services multiple. You're building a marketplace essentially. So the AI does draft one, and then you have a marketplace of attorneys that are available to pop in on their own time. I'm guessing kind of like a BetterHelp model almost in a way where they
Yep.
can pop in and you've got agreed to terms and they can basically do the finish or the polish. Is that
Yeah.
the right way to
Yeah.
be thinking about it?
That's right. We price the subscription super low, so it's basically a rounding error for a business. It's $49 for to use our AI to draft contracts, review contracts, or get answers to legal questions, and that does a good enough job for most people. They don't care enough or want to spend any extra money to get it reviewed by a lawyer. But there are plenty of people that want to spend a little bit extra to have it
Mm-hmm.
verified by a lawyer. So that's where the marketplace comes in. And it's only $50 to have a lawyer look at the work product and verify it or finalize it. And if they can't, then they just provide an estimate of how much it would cost to do it. So it's like, it allows each person at their own price sensitivity, their own risk tolerance to have like their own product.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, how are you thinking about scale? Like, have you done the modeling as you start to get volume? How do you plug into the human element?
Well, luckily, as you scale, you need less lawyers per user because
Mm,
we've learned so much as every time because of the feedback layer that we're using, anonymized feedback layer, that every time it's used, we get a little smarter. The AI gets a little
mm.
smarter, so that helps.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. All right, so um, marketing is going to be interesting for this one because whenever you're defining like a category with a new product, like something like, uh, you know, contracts, you and I discussed a little bit that a prior guest on the podcast was Keith Kroc, the founder of DocuSign.
Mm.
And, he kind of looked at the ecosystem like, okay, want to launch a product, it's e-signing, it's getting out of these paper backed documents, and we're building a new category from the ground up. Like, a lot of people access contracts and work with lawyers, but who does it the most? Well, they landed on real estate agents. Have you given some thought on ICP? Are you narrowing into a group of clients that you want to service, at least for your earlier stage growth, that you want to kind
Yeah,
of get market penetration with?
yeah. So I know it's for small companies defined
Mm-hmm.
as like less than 20 employees. That is still super broad. So my co-founder is like constantly pushing me to really narrow in on industry and like is more and more specific.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the process of seeing which verticals are working the best. The double-edged sword of our traction so far is that it's used widely. Like we have restaurants and
Mm,
caterers using it. We have venture funded start tech, hardcore healthcare tech companies using it. Um, we have lawyers in the backdrop that can serve any industry and in any state. So we have a partnership with Baker Hostetler, which is like 1,000-person, 17 office law firm to handle the backstop the venture fund startups, and we have more like local $350 an hour lawyers to handle like the restaurants. So it's been hard because there's been like signal in a lot of
so
spaces, like
it's
healthcare. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, what do you think is leading to that diversification of beta slash alpha slash early stage adopters? Is it your marketing speaking to
Yeah.
a wider net?
Yeah. I mean, the marketing is generic right now. It just said
Mhm.
like in-house, and the website is inhouse.so if anyone's interested. And it's currently completely generic. So a lot of people use it. Once we identify these couples like industry niches, we're going to spin out websites and complete workflows with unique industry focuses. So far, we found startups to be a big one. So we're definitely going to do like in-house for startups as a
Hmm.
vertical flow. Influencers and marketing agencies have been a big one. So we'll have a flow for them. And construction has been really big too.
Ah,
So we're gonna like striate our product as we learn more over the next few months.
that's interesting. So you've got some early senses of where to verticalize and where to launch some category specific initiatives to drive user acquisition.
That's right.
Okay, very cool. All right. Well, I think we can spend some time on your entrepreneurial journey, and we may backtrack to in-house from time to time on that. But I think one of the cool parts of the blog that you wrote that was really, I think, eye-opening, liberating, gives a lot of people a lot of permission to think differently, get out of the stereotypes of Silicon Valley, see themselves as potential entrepreneurs, regardless of where they grew up, what school they went to, and what their background is. It was very universal. It felt very meritocracy driven, which I really loved,
Yeah, totally.
for a lot of different reasons. But I want to start with this concept of the idea that you don't have to be a starving, ramen eater in order to be an
Yeah,
entrepreneur. I mean,
yeah,
that just like sliced like a knife in so many ways. I remember every co-work that I've ever worked at, there's guys that are eating the free snacks and like the cereal. They're like living off the free Cheerios at the WeWork. They're literally sleeping like in the beams of the rafters or like in closets and stuff like that. Like people take it to an extreme, man. And like, look, I have no problem with hustle culture, but it does kind of limit you to like single dudes that don't have kids who can
yeah,
like basically not work
yeah.
for any money for a period of time. I think you also outlined the idea that a lot of times this whole this hustle culture, I'm not making any money, I'm all about the upside and the exit. A lot of times that's backdropped by families that have rich parents that can afford to give them a little bit of lifestyle
Hmm.
subsidization, and it's not truly what it
It
appears
seems to
to
be
be. Yeah, so
totally.
jump in.
And meanwhile, VCs are like, looking at them as like the pinnacle of risk, and like it de-risks it for them because they're willing to do that. But there's so many different backgrounds that is that really risky. Um, uh, yeah. What part of what part of that should I
Well,
dive into?
I'd like you to start to just talk about your own journey. Why do you think it was not the status quo for you to come into being an
Yeah,
entrepreneur
yeah.
and
So
really, yeah.
totally. So, I grew up in a hippie town, upstate New York. Luckily, I got a scholarship to USC and went straight to a good law school and became a corporate lawyer. So, at a certain, in my, luckily I kind of hit that track. But even still, making six figures as a lawyer in your early 20s, like with student debt, like you still are not in a position where you have like a year of savings where you can do something. So I built my first company as a side hustle to being a corporate lawyer. I was billing 2,200 hours a year as at the law firm, meanwhile building wherefore.com on the side. And that, and that path is what I think most people should take, and they should realize that that's what they should take. And it's getting more and more true every year that you could build prototypes for cheaper and cheaper. I mean, when I did it in 2015, it costs like $25,000 to build an app, which was already 10 times cheaper than it was 10 years before that. So you really can do it as a side hustle. In that case, my boss invested the first $50,000 to
That's
allow me
helpful.
to make to build it. I was like, as long as you make your hours, like that's fine. And now it's like you could do it for free. Like with AI, you could do it for no, and there's all these no code apps. So there's truly no reason anymore for people to risk everything, to quit their job or drop out of Stanford to build the thing. You build it as a side project, you validate it, and then you do that.
Nah, that's really cool. So let me ask you a question. You went to school, you went to USC, you went to law school. Did you ever really want to be a lawyer, or were you kind
Yeah.
of, okay, so you did. Okay.
I always wanted to be a lawyer. I just like admired the field. I wanted to make an impact in the world. A lot of lawyers, like political science, degrees, wanted to make a change. And that's why I wanted to become a lawyer. And maybe I'll get back to that political ambition someday.
Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, I only ask because, I've met so many lawyers, generally from Asian backgrounds and minority backgrounds that went to law school, and then their final like year or final semester of law school either quit or just do it to finish, pass the bar, and then the whole time they're building their influencer content creator business. And then they become an influencer afterwards. And I'm like, well, hey, at least you can negotiate your own contracts. At least there's something. But
Yeah.
they've got this huge pile of debt. And, the reality is, like, if they want to be a content creator, they maybe shouldn't have even gone to undergrad. But just kind of curious on your take on, the family pressure of like law school.
Yeah, I had zero family pressure to go to
That's
law school,
cool.
let alone school at all.
Wow.
So for me, it was a true passion to become a lawyer. Then I discovered that the practice was not what what you kind of how you do it in school. I loved law school. I thought it was a blast. It's very theoretical and academic, obviously, which I loved. Like I love debating like social contract and like that type of thing. But then you do that, I got good grades, became a worked at a top law firm, and then suddenly like success is defined by like, did you calendar like your 30 cases correctly, and did you look up the local rules, like, and you'd get reamed for not doing that. Like I was shitty as a lawyer because my paperwork was just had all these like technical things, and I just didn't have the personality and the ability to just like spend hours focusing on this bullshit. So I didn't like the practice of it, but I don't regret going to law school. I met incredible people. It like trains you to think in an organized way, to communicate. I mean, when you're raising money, you're telling a story, and that storytelling breaks down to like persuasion and telling facts and the right facts. So all that came from law school. If you want to become an influencer, that's probably a bridge too far, though.
Oh man, well, there's a lot of successful legal commentary influencers
Yeah,
now too. So.
that's fair. I'm just thinking, I guess, like pizza review type
Right,
influencers.
right. Oh man, I want to dive into another topic that you brought up, which is kind of side hustling your startup while you're still at the FTE, or while you're still doing the main gig. So, what are your thoughts on the ethics? As a sales guy who's coin operated, I always felt like I owed every moment of my life to my employer for the last 13 years, because the more I work, the more money I make, the more money the firm makes. There's something to be said around that for lawyers, because you could always bill more hours, you could always go out and network and find more clients.
Yeah.
what do you think? Do you think there are certain types of jobs that lend itself to the ethical requirement? I mean, you were very above board. I mean, for God's sakes, your boss was your lead
On
investor.
the cap
Yeah.
table. No, I think that's a great question, and it's one that doesn't come to you until you're a little older, right?
Mhm.
Like, wasn't thinking about that when you're early 20, in the early 20s. I think it's a great. I think it depends. Like the ethics of it depends on the subject matter and how close it is to what you're doing, and also how you do it, like when you do it,
Mm.
which happens to be kind of how the law sees it too. So, for example, if your full-time job, is I don't know, I can't think of an example, but if you're like if your idea is like essentially competing with them, even a small piece of it, like that's not a side hustle, and that's
Mm.
unethical to build that. So it should be in a different. I think it really should be in a different area. Of course, you also open yourself up to like ownership issues if it's too close, and then there's entanglement of IP. So that's a good, and I've never thought of that. So that's a good exception to my rule that you should side hustle everything. Is it should be in a different area as what your main job is. And then also it should be in non-company equipment, and it should be not during expected working hours. As long as you meet those two, 100% is fine. 100% is fine.
Nice. So let's talk to some of the more practical components. So now you've got the green light. You feel like you're good to go. I always thought that I should have been a fireman if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, or like a teacher, or like some kind of a union gig or something like that. But for that as aside, when should your side hustle become your main financial side of it? You've some credence to like running.
Yeah.
You've given some other thoughts. You've been given some other thoughts around, you know, being able to replace your salary or like a portion of, and
Yeah.
not completely abandon your lifestyle. So let's talk about financials and milestones when you make that switch.
For me, income was the entire question. Like
Mm.
my income was what I needed to live my life. So it wasn't much more. So I needed, in order to be full time, I needed to raise enough money to have a similar salary. So, when Wherefore was like a seed round company, when we raised like, I don't know, $3 million or something, I had a moderately high salary. I think it was like 140 or something like that, or 160, which is really high, which is pretty high for industry standards. But I think that's the point, is like you do it for you, and you could always overcome industry standards with traction.
Mm.
Like get leverage. Leverage trumps everything. If you're kicking ass, you could command a much higher, like 5 times higher salary, 800. They'll beg you. VCs will beg you to still do it. So where there's a will, there's a way. You do what you need to do, and if it's not working, you get traction, you get sales, you build the thing.
Yeah, I like that. And you also talked about the idea of timing, right? So having 1 year of runway, whether that is money in the bank from raises, or you can project your sales and expenses to kind of like get lift off. You think that 1 year is a good benchmark to be thinking about it if you're thinking about it from a place of responsibility and not
Yeah,
being a little
yeah.
cavalier?
I mean, a year is pretty short from that perspective. I think like
Mm,
18 months to 2 years is a
yeah,
safer bet.
got it.
Depends obviously on your time. I have 2 little kids, so
Hmm.
it needs to be something more like that
Yeah.
if you're older.
Cool. So something else that I really loved about your manifesto, let's call it, is I love this idea that you went out and you did market validation. You went to talk to real people who could be your customer. But I also love the idea that you were able to prove the concept by creating a landing page,
Right.
spending some money on traffic, having the landing page basically kind of like give the user like, here's what
Yeah.
you'd be getting from this product. It wasn't a
Yeah.
product, it was basically a front end.
Right.
And then they kind of go through checkout or go through some kind of interest form, and it basically says, "Thanks so much. Now we'll go build the product." Right?
Right. Well,
Can you
yeah, the
talk?
wait list. It's like
Yeah,
it's like that's the way to do that.
yeah, I love that. Will you talk a little bit more about that particular experiment you guys ran, and how you leverage that in your
Yeah,
fundraising and your product
for
journey?
sure, for sure. It was so wherefore, you put in your first budget-based search engine where you, instead of saying I want to go to Las Vegas, you'd say I have $650 to go somewhere this weekend. Where can I go?
Mm,
Based on flight and hotel prices. So that was the landing page we made. It was just where for, and then you put in your budget and dates. It was really simple. Like you could fill it in within seconds. And then the idea is on the next page, it would show you all the destinations. So that's the first thing we did is just build that landing page that gave the impression like it was going to give live information. And we got thousands of people organically to give us their email, expecting to see the destinations, and then they see like a cool, like old school, like flickering, like airport board is showing different options that were all static, they're all made up, and then we used that to build our. When we actually launched the product 8 months later, we launched to them. And we did something similar at InHouse. Like the first, we built proprietary AI for InHouse, but the first version wasn't. First version was just ChatGPT plus lawyers, a couple lawyers in the background. So we validated it in the spring. We launched it, just nothing but ChatGPT plus lawyers, and had like 600 businesses sign up and use it and ask. We got
crazy.
to see the type of questions that they were asking, and it validated everything: the types of businesses, the types of questions they'd be asking. Um, yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I love that. I think if I've learned anything from studying your journey, it's figuring out ways to create small experiments that don't uh, break your marketing budget, that are fast iterations, so you can kind of like learn and either fail or succeed quickly.
Yeah.
Have pivots, have opportunities to pivot. I know you had a major pivot on the travel side where you guys kind of went from consumer to B2B. Can you talk about that story?
Yes. Um, we got invited to South by Southwest on stage like 2016 to pitch, and we got off stage and the product was live at this point, expected like a million users, and of course there wasn't. There was like very little press and just some investors. um I basically snuck into a TechCrunch party with my wife that time because I said we need press. Like if it didn't come to us, we need to come to them. So I found out there was like a private TechCrunch party happening at South by, and we basically snuck in. My wife distracted the doorman, and I snuck in. And I told the first like journalist I saw, you know, hey, I have this product. Like I'd love, can I tell you about it? And he was of course very skeptical. But then when he heard the idea, it was just so simple. And he was like, wait, I still remember. He was like, wait, that doesn't exist. I was like, no. He's like, come over here. He whipped out his backpack, laptop, and wrote a story on it. It's still there. If you go to TechCrunch, wherefore, really cool story he wrote on us. That story like broke our servers. Like that literally led to 1 million users a week. And then
Whoa.
and TechCrunch meant a lot in 2016. So it ricocheted through a lot of publications all over the world, all over the world. Uh, and one of those users was, problem is we weren't booking a lot of trips. Like these people were using us for ideas and then going to like Expedia to book the trips that we recommended, flight and
I
hotel.
see. So they were research, but they weren't giving you last click.
Right, exactly. And that's the problem with like all inspiration products is like you can typically shop it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But luckily, a solution came from one of the users. So I got a phone call like a month later from the head of the business travel department of a Fortune 10 company. And they said, what you build is amazing. I booked an entire trip in like minutes. You know, compared to what we use, like Concur, you guys are like have leapfrog. Can you build a better Concur for us? Like a business travel platform for large global companies. And that was incredible. I pivoted the company for that opportunity. So
So
Wherefore
good.
became WhereTo.
Wow.
So we realized, I basically like dove into the problem, discovered all these like problems with like legacy online booking tools, and built a modern, cleaner booking tool. Like came up with a budget for your trip, a smarter policy, like more options, just like kind of common sense stuff. But they loved it. Their name behind it allowed us to land other large companies. And then I had a real, by then, multi-million-dollar a year contract from each of those companies, making a couple million per year per client, and raised an A round from Emergence Capital, like one of the best B2B VCs in the world, and took off.
Crazy. So, did you have to do like a ground up rebuild, like a net new
Oh yeah.
product, or were you
Oh
able to?
yeah. This is like a
Wow.
duck, like duck, like kind of calm above water, like furiously kicking underneath. Like I had to rebuild the entire company around that opportunity.
That's amazing. What a cool story, man. I love that.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's talk.
if you think about it, like I set out to be a lawyer, and then I find myself building a consumer travel tool because I love to travel. It's just solving my own problem. And then I find myself building a business travel platform. And by now, it's like I'm so lost from my original path. And luckily, it's so awesome. I loved the entrepreneur route. I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah,
So you got to just like let the journey happen sometimes.
totally. I think, pivots are crucial, especially when opportunity presents itself. You could have been one of those founders that were stuck to their vision and it all went up in smoke, but
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
willing to
And
be
that's where the legal
flexible.
background came in too, because they just wanted me to be a vendor. They wanted to build it for themselves and own all the
Hmm.
IP. And I was like, well, that's not interesting.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't have enough money for me to build a really good booking tool. But if you're just a customer and you give me a little bit of money, I'll raise the rest from Silicon Valley, of course, own the IP. And that's how I engineered that's how I turned what was supposed to be just like a vendor relationship into own all the IP and have an amazing lighthouse customer to set you on the right course.
Whew. That's a great story, man. I love that. So let's jump into fundraising. So we've talked a little bit about your journey. First check in the door was your boss at the law firm. That's a
Yeah.
great story. I mean, obviously somebody who is vested in your success, but strangely, for selfish reasons, could have been vested in your success to continuing being a good lawyer at the firm. But he saw something and he was willing to buy into your dream.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that man or woman and what do you think his or her motivations were?
Yeah, it's a great question. Lawyers are very risk averse. Like they are not business people. So it was so rare to meet one that was. I switched from a big law firm to a boutique in Santa Monica, and in the first couple of weeks, got to know him. Learned that he owned a Jewish delicatessen as a side project, Lenny's in Westwood. And
Good
he
place.
yeah, he like that was just a side project, and he had 3 or 4 others, including a software company. So I was just like, wow, I got to learn from this guy. And um, I pitched him at lunch like a couple weeks in, and said like, I still remember what I said to him. I said, Darren Enstein is his name. He's the managing
Mhm.
partner of Enstein Glass and Fam right now. And I said, Darren, I respect you as an entrepreneur. I'd love to bounce this idea off of you. So softball kind of approach, right? Because I barely knew him, and he just lit up. And I told him the idea for where I said, imagine a search engine where it looked at flight and hotel prices to figure out where you could go for your budget. And he was like, how much? His next thing he said is, how much would I have to pay to own half of the business? And I still remember the word business as a trigger for me because I hadn't really thought of it as a business. I thought of it as like a thing, a product, a feature. And he already saw it as a business because he was already a successful business person. And I realized what I was getting was not just money, but like, an operational partner. And that's what he was. So we did the first like year or two together. He was incredible. He helped me. He helped me build it in the firm, introduced me to a lot of people. I learned a ton. We're close friends to this day. I invested in his tequila company after the exit. We're full circle. It's been an incredible relationship.
I love that. So, that's the angel side of the story, right? So you go out to friends and family, but people in your network that are strategic to your vision, in addition to, having the means to cut a check. Let's talk about the VC.
Mm-hmm.
You brought on the VC that you mentioned, well known for expertise in their category of B2B SaaS. Can you talk about these selection criteria in which you kind of dated the VC ecosystem and the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yeah,
going
yeah,
out and trying to court that A round?
yeah. I mean, we have had great experiences with VCs, like especially compared to like unsophisticated investors. It's like I think it's very rare for a VC to really uh, like crash a company. It is very common, on the other hand, for like an overactive angel investor to crash a company.
Mm-hmm.
So we started before Emergence was Stage Venture Partners. Alex Rubalcava, a local great VC, came from Anthem, led our Series Seed, and he kind of chaperoned us. He was kind of turned our board around, made us professional, and then introduced us to Emergence Capital. And the biggest difference that I found between VCs and non-professional investors is support versus like oversight. Like most unprofessional investors feel like, especially when they're working with young founders and companies, they feel like their job is to like manage them. These are
Mm-hmm.
people that were typically successful in their own field, like consulting or as a lawyer or whatever it is. So they feel like they could translate that into this new thing, and then they end up micromanaging and often crashing a company into the ground. VCs, on the other hand, are in the they know their thing to do. They're investing in the person. It's like the company's worth zero. It's like the person that's going to make the money. So they're investing in the person. Therefore, their job is to support that person. And that's how every VC I worked with, which is basically Stage and Emergence, were the most supportive possible investors on our journey throughout the whole thing.
Very cool. I love that story because VCs get a bad rap sometimes. Do you have any point of view on equity-based crowdfunding? Like it? Don't like it?
Don't like it. Don't like it. The
Mm,
cats and dogs are the most likely one to sue you.
mm,
The ones that write the smallest checks most likely to sue you. So that alone disqualifies the process. Number one. Number two, there is so much venture capital, including pre-seed and seed funds, that if you can't convince one of them to do it, it's not to say you shouldn't do it, but you should build that prototype and get that traction to get them. And that effort should be spent there, not building a bullshit product that no one actually needs and convincing,
mm.
150 people to put in $5,000.
Very well said, and definitely a strong point of view. So appreciate that. So you talked about another critical inflection point in your journey, which was the TechCrunch story and the power of PR. I'm a big believer that PR should be the first marketing channel that any company invests in. What's your point of view on that?
I mean, it took me sneaking into a TechCrunch party for PR to work. So I'm just fortunate. I personally never had luck with it. We tried.
Wow.
We tried at Wherefore. It just, no one picked up the story.
That's crazy. So the only way you were able to get it didn't come from an agency, but just your own entrepreneurial story. And do you have any advice other than party crashing at South by Southwest, which I think my most successful LinkedIn post ever was tips on how to party crash at South by Southwest. So we have that in common. But any other tips for building relationships with journalists as a founder, maybe versus going the PR firm route?
Yeah, I mean, that is the way to do it, right? You
Mm-hmm.
find individual journalists who are in your area, and you got to write a story that really is not about your thing. It's about like a trend that they cover, and then you just write short, simple, messages to like tie the two together. The more you do their job, the more likely they'll pick up the story. The asterisk on that is that it hasn't worked for me yet. But I think that is the right way to do it.
Well, hey, you got the TechCrunch one. I mean, that's you haven't got it in the current iteration, but I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think it's relationships, relationships, relationships. So, all right, I want to pivot a little bit into your work as a VC and a mentor. So, you are now a successful entrepreneur and startup founder who's had a successful exit. You've been a limited partner as a venture capitalist yourself. You've invested in your old business partner's tequila company, as you mentioned. So, what is it that you look for in the
Yeah.
positions that you take as either an angel or as an
Yeah.
LP?
Yeah. So we had a modest outcome from our thing. So, basically the pandemic crushed us down. We
Mm,
were at 80 million in revenue in like enterprise value in 2019 as a business travel platform and then COVID came and crushed it to
mm,
zero. So
mm,
we sold under duress, to be like honest and clear about things. It was, but did fine. Given the circumstances, we're quite pleased with how where we landed. The company it's now 150 employees, a flight center. The team's thriving. Investors were pretty happy with things, so happy with it, but not a huge pot of money to become a VC. That said,
mhm.
I do invest in startups. I've invested in half a dozen probably in the last 2 years. And what I look for is to build a plus factor that's usually the relationship or learning. Startups are extremely risky, right? You're probably going to lose your money. So the best way to look at it is outside of this, let's just assume I lose the money. What else will I gain from this investment? And you could do that with startups. You can have a relationship with the founder, um, or other perks. So that's what I look for. So I invested in Collective, like a Series B2B SaaS company, because I knew what my company was, because I wanted to learn how they were doing it. And then I invested in Stage Venture Partners Fund as a appreciation for investing in me and Darren's company. So I invest in companies assuming I'm going to lose the money, and to try to learn from the founder and build a relationship with them.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the reality is to some degree, you are building your network with each investment and you're building a portfolio. So, you know, I've spent $35,000 on a single event one time as a marketer. So why wouldn't I spend 50,000 or 35,000 in a company where I'm going to get equity and I'm going to get a go along for a ride? I'm going to meet a bunch of cool people along the way and probably get a cool experience.
Yeah, I
I've
think that's
only
a good way to look at it.
I've only done it once, and my company went public. It was through a
Oh,
SPAC, so
wow.
there was
Well,
a
tell me
few
the next
days.
time you want to do that. You have that feeling.
Yeah, there was a couple of days where I was a millionaire on paper. Then the stock kind of came down to reality. I could have took it off the table and been in a not a retirement position, but a pretty good position. And
Right.
these SPACs just get beat down, man. I mean, I'm at the point right now where I'm probably like 400% still, but
Hmm.
I'm long on it. We'll see how it goes.
Cool.
You are also a Techstar mentor.
Mhm.
What kind of drives that? Is that again that kind of you can either invest your money or your time, and that's your time. So
Yeah,
what made
that's
you
what it
decide to
is.
get in there?
You meet the smartest founders and you get to learn in industries, in totally different industries, with people with totally different backgrounds. Um, coming up with really clever marketing strategies. It's go to market that I typically find the most interesting from these companies. It really gives you a lot to think about for your own company. So it's just about learning is why I mentor. Number one. Number two, giving back. A lot of people help you in your journey. Like I had 200 people like just so unselfishly like commit time to me in my journey. So you have to give back.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's basically the big two things.
No, I love it. So on the first company, you had Rob Dyrdek as an investor, which
Yeah.
when I saw that, I was like, ridiculousness. My friend was his former chief marketing officer, Ian Stewart. So
Hmm.
I wonder, like, seems to be a like really interesting person to have on the cap table. Not I can't see the parallel, but I would love to understand how that happened and what was it that he saw
Yeah.
in the opportunity that got him to come in.
Yeah. He's a really good sport. I'll tell you that to lead off, as you'll hear in a minute. And number two, he's very operationally detail oriented, extremely business savvy, down to the detail, um, which is so different than like the persona from ridiculousness and stuff. It was really interesting. I learned a lot. But yeah, I say good sport because he invested in Wherefore, which
Hmm.
which was in line with his thing. Like Wherefore was for like the people, young people. He taught you where you could travel for any amount of money. Essentially, it was his audience. So we thought that he could market it somehow, but we pivoted into business travel like soon after he invested. So we just went for a right turn, like right after he invested, and he was just a great sport. He was like he always found ways of like supporting us. Like he put a really really bright operational person on us, Brittany Stewart, who actually now has founded like a Burst. She's very successful toothbrush company. She like was, he was like, well, I can't help in marketing, so let me put this operational person on your team part time to help. So she really helped us. So he always found ways of giving to us throughout every leg of our journey, even though it's so different than where it started. And then how we met was through the manager of Ferrari of Beverly Hills. My my co-founder Darren, my investor, buys cars from there, and he happened to buy a car on the same day. He told the manager, he happened to tell the manager about Wherefore, and that same day Dyrdek walked in, and the manager said like, Dyrdek, you should hear about this company. And then I got connected to Rob and went downtown to like the Fantasy Factory or whatever to have that first meeting with him.
That's amazing, man. What a cool story. And, that's the entrepreneurial journey is, you just never know who you're going to meet and who's going to come on board and be part of the story.
Yes.
Well, Ryan, fascinating journey. I've really enjoyed getting to know you in person in the limited time that we've got to spend together at that one
Yeah.
event at First Thursday at the bungalow down in Santa Monica. I think you're building something really cool, and I really love your approach to entrepreneurialism. I think it has some really practical advice and is really empowering to a huge section of people who may not consider themselves entrepreneurs, but have that burning idea sitting down deep inside them that they know they have to get out to the world. So thank you for being an advocate for the uncommon path for the entrepreneur. Anything else you would like to point people to? How do they come on board with
Yeah.
InHouse, and how do people reach out to you professionally to get connected and
Cool.
try and talk to you about working together?
Cool. Thank you for all that. My email address is ryan@inhouse.so. I'm happy to talk to anybody about your own situation. And then the website is inhouse.so. Um, you try it out for free. There's a free trial. It's 1 week. So any business owner or entrepreneur that has had any legal issue that you want to get resolved, come on the website and get it done for free. and go from there.
I agree. I'm not just interviewing. I'm also a client, and I've turned him on to several of mine. So definitely do that. All right. For everybody who's following along at home, if you enjoyed the show that I had with Ryan today, don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. If you leave us a review, and if it's a nicely starred review, that's how we find a more organic audience and how the show grows. And most importantly, if there is a entrepreneur out there somewhere in your life that's looking to raise money, is over their head on legal issues and how to handle compliance at their company, or more importantly, just wants a good piece of inspiration, don't forget to share this episode that I had with Ryan today. So Ryan, thanks again for coming on, man. Really appreciate you.